This is not the White Pen of Hope. At least, I don't think it is. But I think, getting a bit ahead of myself. So, Deltarune Chapter 5 has been announced, and it looks so cool. Guys, it looks so cool. Guys, it's like flowers, and it's pink and gold. It's so cool! And amidst all that coolness are a bunch of creators going through the trailer frame by frame and just poring over every single detail to try and find out what the heck this chapter is going to be about. And I kind of want to do that too. But the main reason I want to talk about this is because I've seen an idea being parroted around by a lot of people that I think is fucking stupid. I'm kidding, that was a joke, I'm so sorry. No, but for real, I kind of just wanted to talk about this because it was an idea that I came up with, I thought it was kind of cool, and I wanted to share it with you guys. Also, just a bit of a warning that this video is mostly off the cuff and not really scripted because I only have like a little under 2 weeks, and I don't have time to script something big. And by the time that I'm finished editing this, it'll be less than 2 weeks. So, yeah. Regardless, hi if you're new, my name is Drew, and let's get into the Ramble. So there are a lot of things that I could probably be talking about with Chapter 5. Trust me, a lot of things. But instead, I want to focus on this thing, and how everyone's been saying that it's the White Pen of Hope, and I just straight up don't believe that or buy that really at all. Instead, I want to present the idea that I think that this could be an artifact that has a completely different purpose in Deltarune, either a simple one or a more interesting complex one, and that artifact and its relationship with Susie will parallel Asgore in a really interesting way that'll show off the interesting and new themes that this chapter is trying to explore. Namely, I think that Chapter 5 will be trying to explore the idea of unhealthy coping mechanisms. I've seen a lot of different people parroting around that Chapter 5 will deal a lot with the idea of nostalgia, and I don't necessarily disagree. I do think that trying to cling to a past that is no longer there and trying to hold to the memories that have, you far left behind at this point in your life will be a big factor of Chapter 5. My only issue is that being the focus doesn't really feel like it makes sense because that kind of already happened in Chapter 3? That's kind of Tenna's whole arc in Chapter 3. And again, I feel like these themes will be important, but the idea of unhealthy coping mechanisms is something that I think not only fits with a lot of the little details and crumbs we've been given about Chapter 5, but also could fit really well with Asgore, and I'll get into that. But to sort of build off my point from the start, let's look at the newsletter that was released that Toby wrote for Chapter 5's announcement just a few days ago. In that newsletter, he writes this to the response of the question, what kind of chapter is Chapter 5? To that he responds, in Chapter 4, we saw dark clouds on the horizon. That's why, let's not look there for now. Let's turn around and watch the sun before it goes down completely. Let's smile again. Let's have one more fun adventure, okay? In my opinion, it fits well with the overall story of the game. Now, obviously, this can be read on the more surface level and understandable idea that this chapter will be kind of a calm before the storm chapter. This chapter will be generally kind of the last little bit of light before the entire game and chapters 6 and 7 get really, really dark. And obviously, I think that's a part of it, but also I think that could very well tie into the actual narrative of the chapter itself. Think of the place these characters have been left right after Chapter 4. Ralsei has been reminded of the crushing weight of the fate and tragedy of the Final Prophecy, Susie has been introduced to the Final Prophecy, and Chris seemingly either doesn't know, or fully knows, or was reintroduced to it. Either way, the entire Fun Gang is having to deal with the fact that this deterministic fate is bearing down on all of them. So it makes sense that they want to have one last fun adventure, right? I mean, Deltarune's already dove into the idea of the Dark Worlds acting as fiction or escapism in some way. There's obviously Susie not wanting the adventure to end, Noelle and Birdley wanting to actually continue going through the Cyber City and making another dark fountain within it, which would have caused the roaring, so thanks Ralsei for stopping it, but maybe you could have mentioned that like a little bit sooner, like come on man, what's your deal? Regardless, the point is that there is a precedent for stuff like this, and I think it makes sense that Asgore, the most divorced man in history at this point, would want to do the same, make a fantasy that he could exist in, but I don't think that's all of it. You see, as much as I believe that Asgore wants to live in a fantasy world of his own design, and ideally maybe even be the king of his own castle again, I don't think that that's his entire goal or his sole motivation for possibly creating a dark fountain in Chapter 5. Also just interject here that I do think Asgore is going to be the primary one making a Dark Fountain in Chapter 5, or at the very least, the Dark Fountain of Chapter 5, or one of the Dark Fountains of Chapter 5, he's going to want to continue staying within and perpetuating because of what it provides for him. Regardless, in Chapter 4's Holiday House segment, obviously there's the part where you're going through the vents of the soul, and you can hear Asgore talking to himself in front of a conspiracy board in Carol's room. During that scene, he says this.
We're almost there, aren't we, old friend? This time for sure, Tori will finally see what really happened. That I just wanted to protect everyone. And this time she'll have to believe me. They all will. Then, we'll all be a happy family again, won't we? It sure is beautiful, isn't it? This black shard.
I'm going to choose to ignore the fact that this man has a black shard, which at this point we know is a powerful darkness weapon that can only be achieved and found by actually facing off against and beating the Roaring Knight, implying that he either has met the Knight, fought the Knight, and won, or at the very least survived long enough to somehow get a black shard, which by the way is also tied somehow to the Shadow Crystals. But I'm going to choose to ignore that this time, because that's not what we're talking about today. No, my point in bringing this up specifically is because I feel like it's a very strong motivating factor for why Asgore wants to make a Dark Fountain in this chapter, or again, be in a Dark Fountain in this chapter. Asgore is still looking for December, presumably, and he believes that finding her will fix his life, when the fact is, it won't. I think one of the plot threads being set up here is that Asgore is fully convinced that December's disappearance is what caused his life to fall apart. And in a way it technically was, but it wasn't December's actual disappearance that caused that. It was Asgore's response to it. It was him throwing himself into his conspiracy work and whatever mistake he presumably made based on his rash judgment because of Dessa's disappearance. Again, we don't know all the details, but I feel like it's fair to assume that the arc being set up here is that Asgore himself was the problem. I feel like there's even precedent to show that Asgore and Toriel's divorce didn't just happen because of Dessa's disappearance. We even get a hint to this earlier in the story, I think, when we get the flashback of Asgore having painted all the Easter eggs, like Yoshi eggs, for Azrael, and then cooking them the next morning, and Toriel getting really mad at him. There's also a small little cutscene in Undertale that I think shows this, when Toriel was still pregnant and woke up Asgore late in the night to tell him a joke that he didn't find funny. I feel like no matter what, these characters, Toriel and Asgore, just weren't romantically compatible, and that no matter the universe or the context, they will always find a way to end up in a divorce. And building on that, I think a big part of why they divorced wasn't just that they were a bad fit for each other, but it's because Asgore has an inability of processing his own grief. In this game, in Deltarune, he's constantly trying to reach out and find simple solutions to complex problems. He feels like if he does these little acts of service, or does these simple things that he knows how to do, that it'll fix all of his problems in his life. In Sansa's shop in Deltarune, he literally asks him,
Can I ask, what kind of flowers do you think would make her remember how she felt before?
This man genuinely believes that he can fix his marriage by buying her a type of flower, because he doesn't want to accept the fact that it's actually over. It's an inability to move on, it's an inability to understand what people actually want, and it's a belief that any problem can be fixed, no matter how complex. I feel like this also has interesting ties back to Undertale and the way that he processed the death of Azrael. When he found out that Azrael died, he was enraged, in the throes of grief, and he killed any human that came down into the underground to reap their soul. Granted, a part of it was definitely to get the souls to break the barrier, but even after his rage died down, he still carried out the mission purely because he thought that that would fix things. He couldn't process what had happened to him and what had happened to monster kind, so instead he threw himself into trying to fix things. And granted, yes, he ultimately didn't want to have to do it going forward, and when he sees Frisk, we see an Asgore that has finally found some level of peace in his life, but I do think that he still goes through with it because ultimately he can't let go of the past. In so many ways, Asgore is a man incapable of truly moving on, and fully believing that he can do acts of service to fix any problem. Which is a very true fact about a lot of toxically masculine figures, especially fathers, but we're not gonna get into that today. So, What does that have to do with this fucking pen? Well, there are a couple ideas I have of what this floating, glowing feather thing could be. It's clearly important because it's, obviously shimmering, glowing, covered in light, and an altar. It's clearly something that will matter. Maybe it's a simple progression item for Chapter 5's Dark World, or the idea that I've been seeing float around that has nothing really to do with this theory, but I think it's kind of cool, so I'll mention it anyways, is that it's actually a traversal power-up, much like the Climb Claws. Or sorry.
The Climb Claws!
Sorry, that was my best Jackenstein. The idea that collecting this feather would give you the ability to be light as a feather and run like a ninja across the water. Mainly because of this shot in the trailer where the characters are doing just that, dashing across the water with these cool after images. Which, honestly, that as a traversal power-up would be pretty sick. The ability to move that quickly and kind of like the stealth segments in Chapter 3, but anytime, maybe with a dedicated dash button, or maybe just context sensitive when you're on top of the water, could be sick. But outside of that idea, there is another idea that I think ties to all the stuff I'd mentioned earlier that kind of inspired this whole video to begin with that I think would be really cool. Namely, that the white pen of hope, as we've come to know it, doesn't actually exist. And this fountain pen, it's not a fountain, this quill, keeping that in the video, this quill, fucking. Namely that this glowing quill is actually meant to be a red herring that Susie sees as the thing that Gerson was talking about. First, let's just refresh ourselves on what Gerson actually says, because I see a lot of people parrot the idea that the White Pen of Hope is a confirmed artifact that will exist in Deltarune's story at some point, when that is not at all what Gerson says, and I think people are taking it way too literally. In the Hammer of Justice fight in Chapter 4, Gerson says this regarding the White Pen of Hope that people keep mentioning.
Well, ain't that something? At this late hour, with the bells ringing out their justice, you choose eternity. Miss, hold on dearly to that thought, for the tides of fate are drawing close, and soon an ocean of ink shall wash across the pages. But there is one thing that can override the dark. A white pen known as hope. Miss, I believe this is what you hold.
Gerson here is not saying,
Susie, you hold the white pen of hope from the hit video game Deltarune, released on all platforms June 24.
Sorry, I'm being facetious, but he never once actually says that Susie wields this magical artifact. He's saying that Susie, quote, wields the white pen known as hope, which I personally choose to take metaphorically as Susie is the girl with hope crossed on her heart. She's someone who has a very hopeful mindset about the future. She doesn't take the fate that she's given, she creates her own ending by forcing her decisions to matter. That's the quality that Gerson is lauding here, the one that he's calling so admirable and important and necessary to break the prophecy. It's no secret that the prophecy in Deltarune represents the idea of fate and determinism, represents the idea of the things that we can't really control, and whether or not the story will end with accepting what we can't control and finding meaning in spite of that, there are things more important than reaching the end, or if it'll be about breaking the prophecy, taking up the pen, and writing our own ending. I'm not exactly sure just yet, and I don't think any of us will know the truth until Chapter 7 actually comes out and releases. But I do know this. Susie's hope is meant to be a reflection of her character. That's why Gerson finds her so strong. I mean, keep in mind, this is the fight where you get the Justice Axe, and while the Justice Axe is Susie's best weapon, I don't think the fight is about how the Justice Axe makes Susie strong. It's about showing that Susie's best qualities are innate to her. It's her ingenuity, her tenacity, her strength, her force of will. Those are what make her so strong and prove that she deserves the Justice Axe. The Justice Axe is a reflection of Susie's strength not just because it's a powerful weapon, but because it's a representation of a hard-fought battle that shows that Susie was deserving of it. Similarly, and just kind of going a little bit off topic, I really don't like the idea that's been passed around somewhat in the fandom that Susie has some innate hope magic within her. I'm not sure if hope will actually be a canonized magical force in Deltarune, a la determination in Undertale. There is precedent that maybe it could be something that becomes important later on, but at the very least with determination, we were constantly introduced to it from the beginning of the game as something that was innate to this world. We were constantly filled with determination, so when the reveal happened that determination was an actual force in universe, instead of just a cute little nod to the player and the idea of staying determined in spite of hard challenges in the video game, it felt more like an actual tie back to something we already knew, rather than something coming out of nowhere. I'm not saying Deltarune can't canonize hope as a magical force. It absolutely can. I've seen the theory that HP actually stands for hope, and I think that's really cool, especially since Susie starts off with the most HP out of any of your partners. Paper Mario? What? Since Susie starts off with the most HP of any of your party members. But as we understand Deltarune now, as it currently is, it is not a force that we have any confirmation of actually existing within Deltarune as a tangible magic. I also just think it kind of robs Susie of some of her character. The strength that Gerson's talking about here, again, isn't some innate chosen one power that she holds on to. It's decision making. It's mindset based. I personally think that's way more interesting than just some innate power, but I'm getting off track. The point of this video is that I don't think the White Pen of Hope actually exists as a device in narrative, for similar reasons to why I don't like Susie having some innate hope magic. I feel like it robs the story of a lot of its tension and a lot of its intention, this is unintentional rhyme, because it makes breaking the prophecy too easy. It makes the story now about finding the White Pen of Hope and using it, which is way less interesting than finding some inner strength and mindset change to combat the idea of fate and determinism, or finding meaning in spite of fate and determinism. It just feels way more lame and simple if there is a canon White Pen of Hope to me. Which is why I think that the idea of it being a red herring like this could be really interesting, because it could show Susie and the player that that isn't the solution. That this simple solution, this fix-it button, doesn't actually exist. There are no quick fixes in life. Everything takes effort, and you have to be willing to put in that effort to make that change, to look inside yourself and to make the proper mindset change. And I think that that perfectly parallels the point that Asgore is at this point in the story. The only way that his life is going to improve is if he realizes that he was a big factor in why it fell apart in the first place. He needs to realize that there aren't quick fixes to these types of things, and that the only way to actually improve his life is to take action, to change his mindset, to realize his mistakes, and to work on himself. He can't just throw himself at problems thinking that they're going to fix everything when he actually solves the simple things. Finding Des isn't going to fix his marriage, it isn't going to fix the Holiday family, it's not going to undo the years of trauma that have happened to all of them. I think that also has interesting parallels if that is carried through with Carol's character arc later on for her. The idea that she thinks that finding Des or holding on to the past in some way, preserving things, is going to be how she fixes her own life, when again, that's not true. Change is scary, and obviously accepting bad change can be extremely hard, especially if you're a grief-stricken parent or someone who feels like they just lost something very personal in their life. But accepting that change is the first step towards actually growing and pushing through it. You can't avoid your problems forever by hiding in a fantasy. You can't expect a simple solution to a complex problem, and the past is gone. You can't rekindle it, and you can't hold tightly to the things that have far been moved on by this point. The only thing you have is the here and now, and you have to make use of it to the best of your ability. Similar to Ralsei, who is constantly worried about the prophetic fate of the future, or Susie, who's trying to break free of her past, or Chris, who's caught somewhere in between, chained by the guilt that they have to their past, and in turn, worrying about and possibly messing up their future. Asgore needs to focus on what he has in the here and now, what he can create and make with his current present, rather than festering on a past that he's lost and a future that he can't create. At least, that's what I think. Again, no shade to anyone who has a difference of opinion or different ideas on what's going on here. Everybody is just trying to better understand a game that we're all really excited to play soon. I just wanted to throw my 2 cents in because I felt like this was something that I thought was a cool idea, and I won't get the chance to really talk about it ever again once the chapter actually comes out. Regardless though, if you did like this video, I would appreciate if you did all the stuff, liked, subscribed, all that. I do have some actual Deltarune theories that are fully scripted and actually planned out coming in the works, but I'm obviously going to wait till Chapter 5 comes out to see if those theories even survive this, new chapter releasing. Regardless, I'm going to be playing Chapter 5. I'm going to really enjoy myself, I can already tell, and I'm probably going to be making videos on it if it strikes my fancy and I come up with any ideas. In any which case, thank you genuinely so much again for watching. And if you want to check out my stuff, hi, I'm Drew. I'm a voice actor and an artist. You can check out my artwork on my socials linked below. You can check me out doing some voice acting stuff a little bit on this channel, but also in the Undertale Yellow cinematic dub, which will be linked right here in the card. And if you actually want to drop by and see me play Chapter 5 for whatever reason, my Twitch is linked in the description. So yeah, thanks again so much for watching. I appreciate it. And I hope you all have a great day. Bye-bye. Be kind to each other. There we go. Cool.
Also, friend, Gaster, Penumbra Phantasm, Nightmare Night, always bet on Papyrus Night, Ram will return. All right.